Hello, everybody, and welcome to Designing AV Infrastructure for HyFlex Instructional Spaces. Fasten your safety belt because every room you will make in the future will either be hybrid or HyFlex in this new world. Not only because of the pandemic, but also people want to learn more from different locations. The old theory of distance learning is upon us, and the metaverse is more popular than ever. You will have to adapt your learning spaces to this new ecosystem. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, first of all, I have to introduce myself. Who am I? My name is Carl Rosenberg. I am the technology trainer at Extron. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I have been in the audiovisual business for 35 years. I started off doing rental staging events. I worked for digital projection for a while to do the research and development for the Texas Instrument chips. And in the last 23 years, I've been a technology trainer and teacher for Extron. So it is my privilege and pleasure to help educate you today about HyFlex systems. So first of all, these rooms, these learning spaces, technology is everywhere in the education arena. Again, even before the pandemic, we have been using technology. And then the schools had to adapt very quickly to the pandemic and even distance learning. Some were prepared, some weren't. But trying to add this ed tech is very hard business, all right? Connectivity, displays, active learning spaces, these are all things you need to be ready for. I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, first of all, every room now looks like what? It looks like a broadcast studio. There's cameras, there's microphones. Everybody has a one-to-one with some sort of a laptop or an iPad or some sort of tablet. People are going to ask you, I need to Zoomify my room or have every room hooked up to Teams. You can do this, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You do have to follow a couple of simple steps to make every one of your learning spaces HyFlex. But if you skip these steps, I promise you will probably fail. But if you abided by these steps and usually do them in order, they're like guidelines, you'll be successful. So let's take a look at how you're going to do this. 3 keys to your success. Please write these down. There's 3 keys to the success, and then there's about 4 physical things I want you to do. So we'll say there's sort of 7 things happening. So first and foremost, the 3 C's. All right, those 3 C's are the creative interface. Somehow you're going to attach Zoom, Teams, WebEx, whatever your unified collaboration solution is, to the system. So you have to have a creative interface. Notice I didn't call it Zoom or Teams, really. It's a creative interface. That's going to change as time progresses at your school or university. So depending, this week you're going to use Zoom, next you're going to use Teams, you're going to use Google, whatever the application is. Number 2, connectivity. It has to be some way to connect everything. This is usually done with cables. Obviously, microphones and audio, please pay close attention to these things. You have, during the pandemic, may have also had to get a microphone in your Zoom studio at home, perhaps, a camera. All these things need to be connected, including the computers and the laptops. And then, of course, control. Do not forget about the control systems. Quite often, people make these rooms that would seem pretty complicated because they could be, but if there's no simple user interface, way to turn on the TVs or make the calls or bring in the HDMI inputs, that will also be an epic fail. And sometimes I see a lot of these rooms where they don't do that properly. Now, these rooms could start to look like this. These are the learning spaces of the future. But you'll notice they have some common things in them. First of all, what do you notice? There's a lot of monitors, and you're going to need a lot of monitors. You'll probably need 2 monitors in the front of the room, if possible, but you can still get away with 1. But more importantly, the teacher is always going to need multiple monitors. You're going to need some audio. You might need more microphones than you've ever had before. Obviously, cameras, and you're probably going to need some sort of annotation for people to draw on. These rooms that you're looking at now are all HyFlex systems. And if you're thinking and looking at this picture right now, go, wow, I only have 1 TV or projector in each room, that's going to be very difficult to do a HyFlex system, right? So if you kind of keep this picture in mind, it doesn't always have to look as fancy as this, you will win as I keep teaching you some of these different things. So let's keep moving. Designing these rooms and prepping for HyFlex. So as I mentioned before, there's the 3 theories of the connectivity and always making sure that you've got some sort of creative interface and the control, the 3 C's. But here are 4 things you have to know to prep for your HyFlex space to work. Number 1, you have to understand USB. universal serial bus. So this connectivity didn't just pop up on us. Everybody has it. They had it at home using printers and keyboards and such. But then suddenly USB sort of dived into the classroom. Now we have it everywhere. This USB communication protocol includes cables and connectors. So a couple things I want you to write down. I need you to think of everything in your classroom or your learning spaces as hosts and peripherals. We talked a lot about laptops and we talk about video projectors, but what you need to gain a handle on is what is the host, which is usually a computer or a laptop, and what are the peripherals, which could be cameras, microphones, and other things that are in the room. Once you get a handle on where the hosts and where the peripherals, some of the rest of it comes easy. The other thing you need to write down, you can only run USB 16 feet without some added piece of equipment, transmitter receiver, a special type of cable, maybe a fiber optic cable. These things seem to sometimes add price. And of course, when you're designing these learning spaces, like we want to make a HyFlex classroom, and you start running these USB cables everywhere, you'll suddenly notice like, well, I'm going a lot farther than the cable that came with this product. How do I extend these signals, right, past 16 feet? Now, the main thing you need to know about USB is its speed. USB has multiple types, 2.0, 3.0, 3.2. They're actually at 4 now. But you need to worry mainly about USB 2.0 and the idea of the speed. It runs at 480 megabits per second, 480 megabits per second. And you'll notice in this drawing, there is a series of host and the peripherals, which are the cameras. And this communication goes between the two of them. So when you plug this camera, this microphone in to the host, you will see this on your HyFlex system so that the people in the Zoom world or Teams world or wherever can see what's actually happening, right? Remember, these are compressed video. It uses H.264, 1080p. We're not doing a lot of 4K stuff yet because the data rates, the bandwidth of certain things that you're buying might not be able to handle it, right? So remember, in this particular drawing, you might need to run this cable farther than 16 feet away. USB switching is also going to be very important. And the USB switchers that you're going to use, you'll need to buy, and they're going to have in them something called host emulation. What that means is when you plug all these peripherals in, the cameras, the laptop, the cameras, the keyboards, and the mice and everything else, they need to connect to the host. You will notice in this particular picture, what is the host? It could be the laptop. It could be the host PC that's in the lectern or the podium. That's up to you. But somehow you will have to take these peripherals, cameras, and wire them to the host. Now, remember, if you've only got one computer in the room or it's a laptop, that'll be a little easier. But if you have multiple hosts, you will need a USB switcher. Right. Another consideration is the world of AV over IP. Now, students, this is a whole nother class to itself, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. And the reason you need to know what AV over IP is you need to understand the difference between AV over IP and streaming. They are similar, but completely different. We are currently streaming, recording something, you're watching something over Zoom or Teams or some interface of that nature for unified collaboration. That's streaming. AV over IP is where you're actually using not only transmitters and receivers, or encoders and decoders, to make sure that you can send these signals with control to different learning places. And it involves control in the active learning space. Now, active learning spaces, certainly something for HyFlex rooms. You need to be very aware of this. You've probably seen pictures. Classrooms with multiple monitors and multiple displays in them. This is all HyFlex energy. It's great. And if you've never been in one of these active learning classrooms or a HyFlex scenario, it's wonderful because all the students are kind of sitting with each other. You're sitting with your peers. It's great because everybody's kind of connected at the same time. The teacher, he or she, can send anybody's image anywhere they want. This is done through a technology called AV over IP. Now, if you look at this drawing closely, you'll notice a little bit of difference between traditional audiovisual. Traditional audiovisual on the left has a matrix switcher with transmitter receivers, usually using some sort of structured cable, but it's a shielded cable. And AV folks have been doing this for a very long time. Traditional AV using a matrix switcher. The new world of HyFlex uses something called AV over IP, which means you can actually buy encoders and decoders and then plug them into an IP switch. Hopefully a layer 3, layer 2 will work. And then this way, you can transmit these virtually uncompressed images back and forth between these encoders and decoders. Thus, you make a HyFlex learning space. And that would look like this. You would have a teacher station, potentially with a decoder or a main screen, and you'd have multiple student stations, potentially tables in this HyFlex learning environment. And somebody could then, at will, hit a control system and send certain students' images to certain locations, including, of course, the instructors or any of the other students. This is all done with AV over IP. The drawing does actually show you how easy it is. It's actually a little easier than you think. You'll notice there are encoders and there are decoders there. And you just pop an encoder at every table where the students sit, and you put a decoder up by the instructor's television, and this will allow them to send anything, anywhere they want to go. Now, why is this also important? Is because if somebody is on a Zoom or a Teams call, again, a HyFlex environment, they could share that information with anybody anywhere else in the room, or the teacher could then also send it to the quote unquote World Wide Web to a Zoom or Teams call. So AV over IP, absolutely a way to do active learning in a HyFlex scenario. There will usually be a control system for these rooms. It would be almost impossible to do it without it. This would allow the teacher to push a button and send whatever information they wanted to any station, or send the station of pod 6 or pod 3 to anywhere else in the room so the other students could enjoy it. Again, a completely flexible scenario. Can you also do this with collaboration? Yes, you can. One of the beauties of AV over IP is it allows you to take USB, which you can see, the cameras, the keyboards, the microphones, and plug them in to a traditional collaboration system for HyFlex systems. So that now I could have one computer be hooked up to Zoom and the other one hooked up to Teams or whatever you're doing. And then somebody could share that information through the peripherals and the hosts of USB. So you'll notice a theme here. The more you can grasp the power of USB and the peripherals and the hosts, you can run them through quite a few AV systems, including AV over IP, like you see in this diagram here. I could share whatever I wanted to. I could share Zoom on one screen, and if somebody came in with a Teams call, I could share Teams on another one. Complete collaboration, complete HyFlex in an active learning environment, all using AV over IP. Another one, wireless technology. So wireless is not new, right? But you have to remember, when you're using wireless video, which uses the Wi-Fi that's in these existing classrooms, you do need to understand something. When you use Wi-Fi and you are hooking up these devices to a system, right, it is for HyFlex systems, you do need to remember that potentially the image quality will not be as good as AV over IP. The reason for this is because there's compression involved. You are using the WAP, the wireless access points, and you are using some sort of a pro video gateway with an HDMI output that goes to a television. This does work, but in super critical applications, like if you're looking at really tight Excel spreadsheets or maps for a scientific application, maybe not the best solution, but it is very convenient to use. And of course, one of my favorite sayings with wireless AV for HyFlex systems is, convenience is the new quality. Convenience is the new quality. If it's very easy for all your students to connect to the existing Wi-Fi, and all you have to do is buy a small gateway box, these gateway boxes plug into your televisions in these HyFlex rooms. And then again, anybody could kind of share anything with anybody else through these systems. And then you could have certain meeting rooms and certain classrooms. You could actually do quad splits and have multiple people sharing multiple things on one screen. And don't forget, you could actually plug in a good old-fashioned HDMI input. So wireless gateways are good, and they are certainly part of HyFlex systems. But just do remember, having one that usually has a HDMI hardwired input is a safe bet. That way you can share wirelessly and you could share hardwired. And if you don't really know the difference, again, I will say this, hardwired HDMI technology is uncompressed. So the image will look as good as possible. Compression technology, which is what traditional wireless is, the images are always not as crisp. The last thing you're going to have to worry about is the UC platform, or kind of not really. Let me explain what I mean by this. You're more going to have to understand the idea of using multiple monitors. So this is one of the biggest faults I see in HyFlex rooms. We were used to always walking into a conference room or a classroom and putting a laptop down, or there'd be a PC in there, and there'd be one monitor, right? Well, when you're trying to do HyFlex systems and you can't see the people who are on your Zoom call, your Teams call, and the live students in the room, and try to interact with everybody at the same time, I will tell you it is practically impossible, because I'm a teacher, to try to interface with these people on one screen. Even in my Zoom studio here, when I'm teaching, I have a large monitor where I enlarge everybody's faces so I can see everybody's face smiling, looking back at me. That doesn't mean the other classmates can see them in the classroom. I could if I wanted to, but usually I need to see their faces. So understanding the unified collaboration platform, importantly, understanding multiple monitors in use. Do not get overwhelmed with this UCaaS thing, the UCaaS, the web conferencing application, Unified Communication as a Service. These players are not your concern. It's software, right? You're going to open up your Zoom, open up your Teams, whatever it is. So this is going to change hour to hour, day to day, year to year, right? Even when my son was his last year at university, he was using like 5 or 6 different platforms to go to school during the pandemic. They all do kind of the same thing. To design a HyFlex room, if you make it designed to only work with one of these, guaranteed the next teacher, the student will come in and want to use the other one. So you can't have your hands tied or be handcuffed to only use one. And everything that I've taught you, you should be able to use any of these. So that's the good news. Any of these platforms will work. All right, now, more important part. When you make these rooms, you need to understand there's 2 types of these rooms. There is a room using an interface. I walk in with my laptop in front of my students. I put down my laptop and I open up Teams or Zoom. Great, that works. Then there are some things called Teams rooms, Zoom rooms. When you use a Zoom room or a Teams room, that means there is already a piece of hardware in the room, again, made by some of these manufacturers, Poly, Lenovo, HP, and such. And that interface will only work with that one unified collaboration solution, right? Nothing wrong with those, but you need hardware. Traditionally in education, people don't make Teams rooms and Zoom rooms. They just make a Teams interface, a Zoom interface. I walk in with my classroom, I put my laptop down, I open it up, and I open up my Zoom interface. Now, as I mentioned, getting control of your monitor situation could be the best information I gave you. That's why it's last. This is the new look of all these classrooms, learning spaces. They've got to have 2 monitors. And the reason for that is I have to see my virtual content in students, and I have to actually see my content, PowerPoint or the World Wide Web, and I have to see my live students. There's a lot going on. I will equate this to the following. Some people were very used to using 1 monitor. Then the pandemic happened. They went home and they started using 2 or 3. Did any of you go back out into the real world and try to use 1 monitor again? It's almost impossible, isn't it? Right? When I travel now with 1 laptop, I almost can't work because I need so many screens. It's the same thing here. Got to have 2 monitors. The teachers in these universities, these classrooms, all has to be 2 monitors for the students, 2 monitors for the teacher. This is the best way to prepare for HyFlex. And so what that'll look like is this. I have a computer or a laptop with a secondary output, and I've got 2 monitors. Those 2 monitors are allowing me to see my quote unquote unified collaboration solution, Zoom, Teams, or WebEx, or whatever, and see my content so that when I do my presentation, the students in the room are just seeing my content, but the people in the HyFlex other world, the metaverse, I'm just seeing them. Now, if I wanted to show their faces to the students in the room, I could do that. I would just drag it over to the other monitor. But if you're trying to do it all on one, it is, again, almost impossible. So some of the best information I give people to try to prepare for HyFlex, use 2 monitors. So to sum up, remember the glue: USB, dual monitors, wireless, multi-platform conferencing systems. And remember that AV over IP is sort of the new catch way to do an active learning classroom with a HyFlex system. My name is Carl Rosenberg. I work for Extron. I hope you have a great time at the presentation, and I hope you enjoyed designing AV infrastructure for HyFlex instructional spaces.